An altcoin teams up with Microsoft and pumps 50%. Nuclear arms treaty thrown in the wastebasket. And you might be able to mint a Tiger Woods NFT. I'll show you how to mint the mugshot. This is Around the Blockchain. Welcome to Around the Blockchain. We got some great guests today. We're going to get right into it. We have Piano Matty B on the top left. And Piano Matty B, you wouldn't happen to have any TA for us today, would you?
I do. We can take a look at something.
I might be calling back to you in a few. Then we have Firoz. How are you doing today, mister?
Great. Thanks, DZ. Happy to be back.
I always love it having you on here. And then we have with the whiteboard behind him, it is Caleb Franzen. Caleb, is your head hiding all the good ideas with yield curves?
No, not today, man.
All right. If his mind is anything but blank. And then we have Arcane Bear, one of my mutant brothers. Arcane, how are you doing today?
DZ, good to be back. Glad to chat today.
What was your Dookie Dash score?
Oh, we were in the top 20,000, so I'm pretty good for an old timer.
Hey. I came in not quite top 10, but I got top 20 as well. Like I said, we're going to be talking about the Ankr Microsoft debacle. Some are saying, look at this price explosion. I just want to show you the chart real quick. Now it is only up about 30%, at one point spiking about 50% here. Ankr just teamed up with a little company out of Seattle you may have heard of. It is Microsoft. And if we look at the 7-day, you look at that 1-month chart, you will see that explosive price action just came out of nowhere. Once again, this is a bear market. We have to hit that all button. Just a little bit of refresher there. But they just partnered up. It is an infrastructure play, the provider, and they want to do enterprise node hosting services on the Microsoft's Azure marketplace. Now, Firoz, that just sounds like some mumbo jumbo. I mean, what does it mean to have a enterprise node hosting services? Is this something for me to get excited about because, it's a huge infrastructure play, or is this just a bunch of fancy sounding words?
No. I am me being from an enterprise background, this is something I would say to be excited about. For a number of reasons. Those who don't know Ankr actually came out they were raising around 2018 and actually went to market in 2019, which was pretty much in a downtrending market, but they did really well, actually. And they've been around. So they were kind of one of the OG infrastructure plays more than anything else. Now, one thing that's important to understand is these guys came out with the concept of one-click node hosting. So again, if you are fortunate enough to have 32 Ethereum, and for example, you want to go and host an Ethereum node, then you've got to kind of go ahead and then download Unix, figure out how to get it all set up, and then create the wallet and do all of this computational stuff behind the background, right, to get it up and running. The idea is that with Ankr Protocol, you literally just go up, log into their website, say, that's what I want to spin up, and they'll spin it all up for you, and then you just go ahead and use it. So it makes it much easier. The barrier to entry for everyday people that want to start dabbling in those areas becomes much more simpler. Now, the benefit that I see really is now it actually opens it up for large enterprises. Sure, some enterprises could go out and research and build their own node infrastructure, hosting platforms. But then why do you need to when you already have a solid player already in this space that's kind of proven that it's working? And it's not just that they're actually blockchain agnostic. It's not just Ethereum hosting they do. They also do it for Bitcoin as well and many other node platforms as well. So for me, it's a big thing because it really does mean that now corporations, if those that are actually looking to experiment with blockchains, they don't necessarily have to go and find all the blockchain experts out there. They just need to have a rough understanding of how these blockchains work. And then they just go and spin up a service and off they go. They can start creating their own dApps on their own internal blockchains, start offering it out to customers. And I think this is a good thing overall.
All right. And we're talking about a major player as well, with Microsoft. Now, Caleb, Microsoft obviously has a very well-versed understanding of technology. They have a very forward-thinking CEO. Do you think that this is the beginning of some of the larger players in the space beginning to understand how blockchain technology at this point is too large to ignore? And even though they're a giant behemoth worth multiple billions, even they have to pivot to this new tech. Do you think this is a sign of things that come with Google, Apple, and some of these other large players?
Yeah, I mean, not just billions, right? Microsoft is over $1 trillion valuation. So, the fact that they're kind of moving into this space is definitely a good sign. I wouldn't say it's the beginning of that process. I'd rather say it's more of a continuation, right? Because we've even seen announcement that Google has made with their Google Cloud service, basically allowing people to operate nodes using Google Cloud, right? So for me, this is a step in a continued step in the right direction, essentially. And it does show, like these massive tech companies aren't going to move super quick into Web3, the whole crypto infrastructure system. But at some point, as adoption continues to grow, they're going to flock into the space, right? And so I think maybe for a lot of people, they probably hadn't even heard of Ankr until this announcement, and then as soon as Microsoft gets involved, it's going to be on everyone's radar. So that kind of immediate pop and then settlement back down, right, as the market kind of digests the proper valuation, is interesting to see. And I think more so than anything else, right, it's just it really does kind of just highlight how competition and innovation work together, right? It's like all of a sudden there's all this innovation happening in crypto. Google Cloud is announcing things, so on and so forth. And now Microsoft, the second largest cloud servicing company, is saying, okay, if Google is moving in that space, we should probably take a look at it as well. And so who knows what this partnership with Ankr is going to manifest into over the months and years to come. But once again, right, innovators are now continuing to come into the space. More capital is going to come in. This is a massive win-win for crypto and for legacy tech overall.
Yeah, and like you said, massive amount of capital. That is a trillion with the T, so we're looking at a lot of billions there. Some would say even 1,000. Arcane Bear, this is a pretty good infrastructure play for Ankr. Obviously, they're going to be the big winner here, teaming up with Microsoft. Microsoft, I don't think the shareholders are, popping champagne off this little bit of a partnership deal. But are there any other infrastructure plays that maybe you're interested in? And if not, what do you think of this Ankr play with Microsoft?
Well, I thought it was kind of funny because my thought, I first went to Amazon and Avalanche, who recently started talking about their partnerships. And then I think there was also Solana. I think Google had bought Solana nodes. So we've seen somewhere along this pathway that infrastructure plays from the enterprise have started to recognize that there's value in this. It's not just, hey, this is a decentralized ledger. It has a bunch of functions as a kind of a global smart computer. Now, I'm more excited about Avalanche, I think, just in general, for the potential for what it could do. Feels like it's already achieved what Ethereum's trying to build itself to. Ethereum keeps adding on bespoke, like, oh, here's a turbo and an intercooler to make the vehicle faster. In general, though, I'm not, like, to me, these things aren't a huge sign of success per se. A lot of these old legacy companies bring centralized ideas with them. And one of the things that I've learned from this last market cycle is the value proposition of decentralization is the most important part of the conversation. So I don't know what it is that Microsoft is going to do, but they're not a decentralized company. None of the things that they vote on are decentralized. They have their own investors' best interests at heart. So whatever their thoughts are with Ankr, it's because they feel they can provide something of value to their shareholders. Now, what that value is, I'm not entirely sure. But again, we've seen multiple blockchains move into these kind of enterprise relationships. Polygon, I mean, has been knocking it out of the park lately. They've been from Nike to Starbucks. They've been going through the lineup of, I guess, enterprise style partnerships. In the long term, though, what's most exciting are the kind of unknown innovations that come from the sector. I don't know what the difference of being hosted on Google Cloud services or Amazon Web Services are, but it definitely, I think, brings up an interesting conversation of who then is the decentralized version of these cloud services that we're looking for. We've seen a few variations, but until then, I'm just like, oh, great, another centralized company who's awesome.
Yeah. I think you summed it up well with that one sentence. It's just yet another, a lot of these legacy corporations bring their centralized ideas to the table, and, maybe not the best thing. Well, Piano Matty B, I think it was Caleb who said, the market is still digesting its fair value. You can see the huge upswing here. Sundar, let me know next time you announce a partnership, the CEO of Microsoft. But I found this fascinating. It's like when they say, TA is just, horoscope for crypto bros. I see little things like this, a little bit of almost a perfect convergence with this low point that turned into support, perfectly matching up with this area. So it seems like, these aren't price levels that they're not used to playing around with. Is there any TA to glean some data from this Ankr? Because we've seen huge pumps with the AI coins, Matty, and then, okay, it pumped 40%, pumped 60%. There's no way it pumps over the next week. There's no way it pumps over the next month. But then it'll still pump over the next month. Are you possibly seeing something similar with Ankr here, with as small as the market cap is, or this maybe a little too risky for Piano Matty B?
Well, if there was one thing I knew, I wish I knew how to trade, it's exponential moonshots out of nowhere, because I'm pretty sure I'd be maybe the wealthiest man in the world. So when these things come along, I mean, it's only the insiders that really know what's going on before this happens. But I think what excites me about it is that it's kind of a legitimization of where we're headed. You know, it's like we spent the past 2 years, everyone poo-pooing every aspect of Web3 and altcoins, and all of a sudden, it's like we're witnessing the big tech monsters wifing up with some hot altcoins, right? But I guess my con of it is like in all marriages, you marry first for love, and so they're all kind of like infatuated with this idea, and then that fizzles, and then the next one's for money. So I think there might be a sacrificial lamb out of the gates with some of these alts. So I'm kind of looking for the second one, you know, the marriage for money.
Okay, and Ankr moving, is this something you maybe are going to keep an eye on, or is the ship has sailed?
You know, a pump like that, especially in, you know, the bottom or the beginning of, you know, the new bull market, I don't know. I psychologically, I just turn a blind eye to it. I don't want to know if it pumps anymore.
That's me with the AI coins. That's exactly me. At a certain point, you miss out on it, and you just don't want to know. Don't tell me that it's pumping. In fact, if it is dumping, please tell me, so then I feel like a genius. All right, well, speaking of geniuses, we have some people pushing us towards a nuclear winter. I'm kind of kidding, but not really. We have Putin now backing down from nuclear arms treaty. This was signed, came into force 2011, and he announced today that Moscow is going to suspend any participation between U.S. and Russia. This was the treaty. It was the Treaty on Strategic Offensive Arms, and they have since suspended it. And a lot of people were saying the war in Ukraine, the NATO expansion, and just the escalating tensions led to this. And NATO secretary had comment on it, saying the military alliance urged Russia to reconsider their decision. So this seems to be the official NATO line at this point. They're urging Russia to reconsider. And then Biden also made a surprise visit to Kiev yesterday, and some are saying he maybe potentially fell down the steps. We don't know. We do know what Xi Jinping and Putin are doing, however. They're making pancakes, folks. So if you're wondering, hey, what are the, some would consider one of the most powerful men on the planet, and then you have Putin, they're flipping some flapjacks, y'all. So, no worries here. Now, Arcane Bear, I'm just going to bring it back to you. Obviously, we're trying to predict the future. This is a tough thing. I'm hoping your shaman gave you some insights here.
What about me? Looks like I know anything about geopolitics here.
Well, are cooler heads going to prevail just on a human level? I mean, that's the scary road to go down, and they have
I don't think we're dealing
almost
with
6,000 nuclear warheads.
Yeah, I don't think we're dealing with humans necessarily. I haven't seen any like human-like decisions. I think we entered World War III probably around March 2020. I think we've been at war since then. Now, this new war is being fought a little bit differently than other wars. Kinetic weapons are some of the least useful. Here, it's psychological information and largely basically electronic warfare, from what I can understand. This idea about two nuclear powers shooting each other, it just is like we've hit absolutely no other choice. Effectively, they're more likely to make these rogue attacks. And one of the things that the terrorists brought up were these guerrilla type warfare attacks called asymmetric warfare. For instance, if I just blow up a bunch of trains and leave a bunch of chemical toxins spewing around your farmland, that's a pretty great way to attack a country without them necessarily knowing who did it. I'm not saying that's what's happened, but effectively right now, I think we already entered the war and people just don't know it yet. Now, that may not be a favorable opinion, but I think we already entered the war, and I don't think it's with Russia. I can tell you that much. I think we're dealing with a globalist coup of some type, some intelligence agency coup d'etat on the entire globe. So not a popular opinion. I really don't think Russia is our enemy. Actually, to some point, it feels like they're almost maybe on our side. Something like an enemy of my enemy is my friend type thing. But I don't know, because I definitely don't think the information that we get around this war, what NATO's doing, what Ukraine is doing, is anything other than propaganda. So I can't imagine what they're telling me is true. Now, that could just be because I wear this nice tinfoil hat here, but I don't know. Well, probably not best to ask you about geopolitics.
Well, Firoz, Arcane Bear, you brought up a fascinating point, and I kind of want to double down on this when you brought up kinetic warfare. Now, Firoz, I'm bringing this one to you because you live in England, and famously a lot of damage during World War II versus, say, France, where you have Hitler walking right up to the Eiffel Tower, leaving it pristine. I don't know where you are in relation to some of the bombings, but definitely a different story for a lot of English countrysides and English towns. Do we put too much weight on kinetic warfare, and are we not putting enough weight on unconventional means of warfare? Because are we just biased to the past? I think of Vietnam as an American citizen. I think of World War II. And are we not giving enough credence to some of these unconventional and possibly unseen methods?
Well, look, I mean, you're right. From our perspective, I would say maybe we're slightly less, well, more affected than the US. In all honesty, I mean, like the rest of the world, we've seen gas prices, we've seen electricity prices, all of these things go up, and they have a very big impact on our cost of living. As part of that, our own government is subsidizing our electricity bills and our gas bills, interestingly enough, in order to try and keep those prices down. Now, I think as time has gone on, though, in all honesty, if we kind of go back a whole year now to when the initial invasion started, we saw overall markets being very jittery in general in terms of the reaction that we've seen. And I think now we're getting to a point where really, this recent sort of pullback from the treaty, it's just more of a show of force. And if you were to ask me, does it change anything? I would most probably say no, because in all honesty, Russia pulling back from the treaty just means that they're going to share less information. But the other question I would say is how much information were they accurately sharing in the first place between the US and Russia in terms of their nuclear arsenal? So I think I'm going to agree with Arcane Bear in terms of just the way that it's being fought. It's just very different and more or less by proxy.
No, you brought up a good point. In this deal, essentially, you said is sharing information. That's a perfectly way of putting it. You allow the inspectors to come tour your facilities, and you hopefully are transparent and say, this is where everything is. Here's our full item list. The Pentagon, to your credit, did say last month that they weren't being forthcoming. So essentially, it's like the treaty wasn't even effective at that point. They just already had ripped it at that point. All right. Well, good point there. Well, Caleb, I want to ask you more about the macro investors, the big money, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, the people who really are fascinated by the 10-year and the 2-year treasury yields and when they invert. I'm kidding, of course. But does this treaty, the fact that they're backing out, does it change any of your macro assessment for 2023? Or do you see this as just part of a larger act that has already been in session?
Yeah, interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily changed anything about my overall macro outlook for the year. That's predominantly focused on what's happening here in the US with the Fed, so on and so forth. I will say though, I think overall, right, markets were very kind of in tune with the risks associated with Russia and Ukraine in the first quarter of 2022. And essentially since the invasion, it was kind of like a sell the rumor, buy the news kind of event where it was like the actual fear of a potential war was scaring the market. But once it started, investors got past it very quickly, right? And so we've continued to see escalation after escalation. I mean, even North Korea this last weekend doing what they did. And, it's like these minor steps haven't phased the market at all. And in the grand scheme of things, right, from like a macro perspective, no one's really talking about the risks associated here with the geopolitical aspects of this particular situation. And so I forget who it was in the beginning there said, right, like, look, I'm certainly not a geopolitical expert myself either, right? But the one thing I do know for certain is that the market hates risk almost more than anything else, right? Risk and uncertainty are the market's worst enemy. And so when we see these types of things kind of unfold, it elevates that level of risk. And so far, markets have been able to move past those risks. However, as it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. We don't know when that straw or which straw falls is going to break the camel's back. And all of a sudden, the market is going to become infatuated with this particular situation once again. But even today, right? I mean, today was a really nasty day for the indexes, but I think that was more due to some really strong economic data that we got in the morning and just overall kind of investor psychology. But I don't think even still, I'm not really seeing too many headlines of despair and caution and risk and oh my gosh, you should start selling your assets now because, Russia is leaving, this nuclear pact. So that's kind of how I think about things overall, but I'll just tie it back to that phrase that I mentioned earlier, which is the one thing that the market hates more than anything else is risk and uncertainty.
Let me ask you about this. Now, you know about the slow boil theory with crabs. If you want to boil a crab, you put it in a pot at room temperature, slowly bring it up to a boil. It will not try to escape. Are the markets doing the same thing with the war? You said at first, very fearful. Once it began, mostly shrugged it off. As it escalated and escalated and escalated, are we escalating ourselves into a boiling frenzy where we won't realize what's happening until, it hits the fan, proverbially?
That's a fantastic analogy. And so, I think you put it perfectly and, it's very appropriate actually. So, you summed it up excellent.
So yeah, that is a possible. All right, well, we're gonna have to keep an eye out. So maybe watch out for those markets to just turn on a dime. Now, Piano Matty B, north of the border, our peaceful brethren. You just want to hang out with the moose and Jim Carrey and just be a good guy. A scary Russian to you is Rocky and Bullwinkle villain. Are you concerned at all with the U.S. and this Russian nuclear treaty? People stepping away from it, Putin stepping away. Does it change the Canadian temperament whatsoever?
Of course, but up here in Canada, it's so cold that you always have to have tinfoil underneath your toque, especially when you go to plug in your car for the night. So I kind of agree with Arcane Bear that we did start World War III by other means a couple of years ago. And I remember thinking when the invasion first happened and there was like these old tanks and boots on the ground coming over the hills, I'm like, is this what war is still 50 years later? And then it's like, no, this is the theater of war, and then everyone can film it, but what's going to happen is the slow kill destruction of economies and like what we're seeing with the chemical spills and everything. But there's an old saying, war is a continuation of politics by other means, politics is a continuation of economics by other means. So it is scary, but it's the ultimate black swan, right? So like you can't even really look at that sun too close, because if it happens, well, there's nothing to talk about, right?
Not at all. And so are you at the point where you're stockpiling maple syrup yet?
Well, it's funny. I do have 25 years of astronaut food, and I do have a water purifier ready in my trunk to go.
3 points. 25 years?
Yeah, you can get it at Costco.
1 point for every decade. We're rounding up. 3 points for Matty B for being a prepper. Had no idea. That's a serious food right there. All right. Do not share your address for the love of Christ. All right. PGA and NFTs. Let's talk about it. I was kidding about the drunken version of Tiger, but maybe, who knows? They have teamed up with DraftKings. That's right. DraftKings, very famous fantasy sports betting app. You can bet on UFC, NBA, Little League, about everything in between. I don't know about Little League. Don't quote me on that. But they are now launching, big moment, in conjunction with the PGA Tour, the first set of NFTs, the PGA NFTs launching on March 6th. And then with the first in-game event, Players Championship, are going to be March 9th through the 12th, where you're going to be able to utilize those NFTs as some sort of betting algorithm. I don't know, maybe you draft or you mint the good one. If they end up winning, you're probably going to have some money in your pocket. They have done the same with the NFL and UFC. I looked into it on OpenSea. It doesn't really look like it's too active at the moment, but pretty big thing with the PGA. And I had some stats on the betting habits of America. I was just curious, how many people on a daily average are using these betting sites? 7.3 million Americans are daily fantasy bettors. Now, I'm going to ask you, Caleb, you look like a stats guy. I don't know. I don't think, did you play, you ever play any fantasy football? Just off ever?
I haven't, no.
All right. So we got 7 million people. They're doing this daily. They're betting daily. Obviously, going to tie the NFT. You meant the right guy. You trade for the right guy. They win. You earn some money. Can they replicate the Reddit formula where they onboard of these millions of people? They onboard them onto NFTs, but they don't even know it's an NFT. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, it certainly is possible. And, I did look up their fourth quarter revenue for DraftKings. Looks like they had about $833 million in actual revenue, which was something like an 80% increase year over year. So this company is growing like absolutely crazy, right? The stock is up 75% year to date. But the funny thing is, even though they're up 75% year to date, they're down 75% from the all-time highs in early 2021. So the stock is, extremely
Thanks, Dave
beaten up. But
Portnoy.
recently,
It's Dave Portnoy's fault.
yeah. Well, Penn stock looks almost the exact same, right? So all of these companies, these super high growth stocks, are just getting totally repriced in a high interest rate environment. I think your question overall, though, was like, are people really just going to kind of be onboarded without even really knowing that they're interacting with NFTs on a consistent and regular basis? And it's a pretty interesting question. The only thing that I could really relate this or tie this back into, I think the company is called is it So Rare or something? I forget. Is that right? Anyway, they have kind of like a sports. Yeah, they have some sort of like sports NFT system, and like if you're into basketball or something, right? Like you can open up a card pack and you get all these players, and you can essentially select which ones you want on your roster, and you get points for them, right? And then these are basically like tradable NFTs that you can then go into the market and sell them for whatever, right? So, it could be something very similar to that, or maybe kind of just like a rewards-based system. Like in addition to like actual monetary incentives, like having some sort of NFT based incentive. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see. And as you like correctly pointed out, 7.3 million daily users of sports betting applications, and so DraftKings is obviously going to make up some considerable portion of that amount. And so a lot of people who are probably out of kind of the normal crypto ecosystem might start getting this on their radar now.
All right. Well, Arcane Bear, this is actually the second PGA NFT. There's another one where they focus on moments. There were moments with NBA Top Shots. You got your favorite player dunking on the guy and the ball hits him, and they would classify that as moments, making the free throw to win the game. So they're going to do the same thing with PGA. So they have one NFT where it's moments, more of a collectible. Then they have this DraftKings NFT, and it's more utility. You can earn money, you can make money, you can bet with it. What do you think is going to be the more popular strategy for PGA fans? Is it going to be the people that want to flip it and, maybe make $50 because their favorite player won? Or is it going to be the guys like, I just really love Tiger Woods and I wanted him fist pumping?
Well, I probably am going to not talk about at all what you just asked me, but I will make a statement. First off, we invest in a company called Real Fever, which does something very similar. You can build fantasy sports teams. Now, I think a lot of the utility in the betting range or itself is really about a scale of like a function of scale. So, for instance, I'm hyper bullish around video games. So, for instance, the reason why you guys shared some stats. I want to share some stats. I'm going to share some stats, and I will get back around to your question. The PGA generated around $1.5 billion in revenue in 2021. Fortnite did $5.8 billion in revenue in 2021. The average PGA golf course has around 398,000 viewers, and for Fortnite, it's around 268,000 viewers. But that's every 7 days, whereas the PGA, I believe, is maybe just for a few weeks out of the year. The gaming industry is just a no-brainer when it comes to NFTs. I think a lot of this stuff around sports, I'm not really interested in sports. I didn't grow up liking sports. I don't know what a golfer is going to like, whether they even bet on golf. I mean, golf is a pretty tame sport. I would guess you'd get more like really hardcore bets on more violent sports, most likely just based off the nature of the people who like those things. They'd be less risk adverse. So in terms of the betting industry, the gaming industry, the music industry, the film industry, they all get dwarfed by the video game industry. And for me, that's what I'm most excited about. I think a lot of this stuff is just another way for something like DraftKings to try to value capture for themselves. They recognize that their industry needs to do things to stay forward thinking, to try to give more value back to the consumers, and you might be able to do that. And I think that that's a really interesting question. We've thought this about charity. Literally any business model, can you give away something free and it as a collectible over time accrue this kind of secondary market value? Maybe you were the best better that year, or you built a team that won the prize, or I guess you'd have to maybe own one NFT for golfers. I'm not sure how you'd even play a team like betting sport with golf. But ultimately, what I'm most excited about is how the gamification of NFTs develops over time. So yeah, I don't know, kind of a long-winded answer to say I think that gaming is way bigger than sports, film, music.
And I experimented with DraftKings a little bit. I think you'd get like 5 golfers. You would have a market cap, and So you can't just have the 5 best players. You'd have to have some crappy ones, 1 or 2 good ones, a medium guy, and then your combination of 5 players, is their score low enough, and you would beat other people. So the more sought a player is, the higher it decreases your salary. And so you have a salary cap. I believe that is how it would work. Now, Firoz, what do you feel about the 7 million people that are betting daily? What kind of capture rate are they going to get for these 7 million people? I mean, is it going to be, similar to crypto stats, maybe 10%, maybe 15%? Or do you think they can maybe pull half of them?
No, I think there's a few things to look at it from here. First of all, I want to give out a shout out to Polygon because this is where those NFTs
Biz
are going to
dev
be minted.
team,
So that's
just
always
yet again.
that's always a plus. Because again, Polygon does it again with a very large, brand, DraftKings as well. Now, the way I see this is all they're really doing is capitalizing more than anything else. They already have the gambling, the gambling market. I mean, I'm not really into gambling much myself, but well, some might argue I'm in crypto, but then again, that's a different story. But when we sort of look at it from this perspective, they already have a big chunk of the gambling market anyway. And I think all they're kind of really doing is like we spoke about earlier on the show, where Microsoft are partnering with Ankr, for example, in order to use their one-click node hosting solutions. In this instance, DraftKings are ultimately creating NFTs, using Polygon Network in order just to bring a different spin into it. Clearly, they're using a formula that has worked with previous NFTs. So they are almost kind of just regurgitating that sort of marketing media book out there again in order to capitalize more from the gamblers that we have. And I don't think them moving or doing it on NFTs is going to, you know, they may get some of the crypto people. For example, some people obviously might not have been necessarily into DraftKings, but now they'll see, oh, hold on, Polygon NFTs. There's a bit of news. We'll see a bit of a pump around the market because all of a sudden they're minting over on Polygon. So there's that pool that comes in, and I think we'll get some of our sort of gamblers that are in the crypto space moving over and sort of giving that a go. But ultimately, all they're really doing is tapping into their existing market and just utilizing NFTs as a part of that and as another spin in order to generate more money. I mean, that's what they do here at the end of the day. House always wins.
All right. And Polygon seems to always win too when it comes to these biz dev strategies and these strategic partnerships. Just can't beat that team. Now, Piano Matty B, this question is out of left field. Nothing to do with this topic, kind of, except it has the word gamble in it. What was Piano Matty B's biggest gamble? And did it pay off or did it bust?
Interesting. Well, I actually had a very sordid past in gambling in general. I was a dealer, a land-based dealer in a casino. Then I worked on a cruise ship. Then I had my own little boiler room in my basement. And then I had a poker company. So if there's one thing I know, it's the appetite of a gambler, and it's basically it's never ending. But I think my biggest risk is about 10 years ago, I had all these amazing gigs lined up for the summer, and I decided to ditch them and take all my money and go to Peru, do ayahuasca for a month. And so I spent 30 days doing ayahuasca and tobacco purges. And that basically changed my life. To this day, I don't do any recreational drugs. I had a baby. I'm in crypto. I'm a full-time musician. So it was that risk of turning down all those sweet gigs. And to this day, I don't even know what the gigs were. I knew they were sweet, but I don't care because the gamble paid off.
Arcane Bear, do you approve of that life choice there?
I support this message, but do your own homework research.
All right. Good stuff there. And it looks like that is all we have time for. It was a great episode. Arcane Bear, you ended up knocking it out of the park with the arms treaty and all the facts you had. Arcane Bear, feel free, leave us with some parting thoughts, sir. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I'm muted. Oh, my Lord. It's great to be on the show again with you guys. Thank you for inviting me back. Great to see all the guests. Had a fantastic conversation. I always like, again, you guys ask me questions I wouldn't normally think. So thanks for letting me try to break the boundaries of your questions and allowing me to participate. Make sure you follow all of the participants on today's show. And Dizu, it was a pleasure as always.
Hey, we'll just leave it with the house always wins.
Yes.
That's all we got to say. Until next time, Biz Squad. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you check out everyone's link is going to be in the description. Go to their channels. Make sure you sub. Watch their last video. Leave a comment. Leave a like. That's all we got. Till next time.